Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. I'm Samia Aziz, celebrating the power of literature and the voices of authors and changemakers from the global majority. Join me as we explore the stories that inspire, connect, and transform our world. Let's uncover the stories that truly matter together. Today, I'm so honoured to welcome Hala Alyan to the podcast. Hala is an award-winning Palestinian American writer, poet, and clinical psychologist whose work has long explored the intimate spaces between memory, home, displacement, and the inner worlds we navigate. Many readers know her through her poetry and her acclaimed novels, Salt Houses and The Arsonist City. But her latest book, I'll Tell You When I'm Home, brings us into an even more intimate landscape. Structured in 12 chapters, each corresponding to a month of pregnancy, the memoir unfolds at the pace of a body, hoping, fearing, changing, and remembering. In this conversation, we explore how Hala writes about belonging, grief, and the complicated terrain of family and identity. We also spend time with the memoir's deeply personal themes: infertility, baby loss, and the ways these experiences reshape identity and belonging, how they alter one's relationship to the body, to lineage, and to the idea of home. Hannah writes with remarkable honesty about her struggle with alcohol addiction and the difficult, courageous work of recovery. And she's equally candid about the complexities of marriage, the tensions, the ruptures, and the quiet forms of repair that make long term partnership both challenging and deeply human. We also reflect on the past 2 years and how this moment for Palestine, the grief, the witnessing, the insistence on remembering, has shaped her understanding of heritage, responsibility, and where we locate ourselves in times of collective pain. It's a thoughtful, layered, and profoundly honest conversation, and I'm truly grateful to share it with you today. Hala, welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. It's so wonderful to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much for having me.
I absolutely love everything that you've ever written. I'm a huge,
Oh,
huge
stop.
fan of all of your work. I think you're doing some really, really amazing things for the world. And I recently read your memoir, I'll Tell You When I'm Home. And I mean, I was expecting something beautiful and profound, but I have been blown away by it completely.
Oh
And
my
so
God, what an entry point.
I,
Thank you.
I found it so healing. I think you put words to some of my own thoughts and experiences that I have been looking for so long. And so, yeah, like it's been amazing. So I can't, yeah, I'm really looking forward to just sort of getting into some of that. Um, and yeah, it's amazing to have you on the show. And so
Thank you so much for having me.
you are a writer of that's explored many different forms.
Mm,
You've written novels and poetry, and now you've turned to memoir. What sort of changed for you, I guess, in
mm,
deciding that this was now the story that you wanted to tell, and also choosing the form
right.
within which you did?
To be totally transparent, this book is unlike any book I've written in that it was not planned out.
Hmm.
It was not even sold to the publishers as this book in its iteration. It was sold as a collection of essays. And actually, just the other day, my friend asked to see a sample proposal, like a nonfiction book proposal, and I sent her what ended up being I'll Tell You When I'm Home. And I was reading over it and I was like, oh, this is
Hmm.
nothing to do with what the book ended up being. But essentially, I sold, like in the post pandemic world, I sold on a partial, meaning I'd only had a couple of the essays written, a proposal for a collection of essays that range topics from like kind of exploring different psychological phenomena. So, like nostalgia and dread and exile and whatever. And each piece is sort of like a deep dive into these experiences. And it was like, I sold it and they bought it kind of, we all sort of understood it would probably change form, but we were like, well, I'd worked with the editor before and I'd enjoyed it. And so we figured, we'd figure it out. And then we couldn't figure it out. Like the essay collection form just wasn't working. And I think a big part of it was that the editor rightfully kept saying, it's missing connective tissue, it's missing a
Mm.
spine. There needs to be something that links these essays. It can't just be that you wrote them. And I, as someone that's not a nonfiction writer, certainly not a memoirist, I just couldn't figure it out. It was not a format that I knew how to work with. I almost like switched the contract over to a novel. Like I just like really didn't know what to do with it. And then kind of when we were at the end of our rope, because at that point I'd pushed the deadline, I think once or maybe even twice. Uh, and of note is also what was happening behind the scenes during this era was like this age of infertility for me, a lot of strain on the marriage that I was in, really wondering and longing for a child, not sure if it was going to happen. Then ultimately finding a surrogate to carry Layla, who was biologically ours, but who I just couldn't, my body wasn't able to carry. And so I remember having a conversation, kind of like we were at the end of the rope, me and the editor, and I was just like, I just don't know what to do. I'm so sorry. She was like, I'm so sorry. I thought we were gonna figure it out. Like we got to, And I said to her, I had one other idea, and it was just a throwaway. I was just in the downstairs basement area of my physical therapist office. And I remember exactly where it was. And I was like, I had this idea of like structuring something around the months of pregnancy,
Hmm.
but as they're happening in someone else's body, and like, and then, and what it's like to wait for something to happen in someone else's body, and then kind of weaving in some of these other things I'd written about in the essays, these different themes. And she was like, okay, I think we might have found the connective tissue. And so it's very
Mm.
funny because the whole time the connective tissue was my life. It was
Mm.
what was happening. And I think, she also said this once to me where I was like, well, I could, yeah, this story, but who wants to read that story? She's like, you have to, it's very hard for people to view their lives outside of their own eyes. So like, I view my life as a very, like lovely, but kind of dull thing. Like it
Mm.
just is what it is. It's what's happened to us, Um, and she was like, but it's not like these stories are not stories that a lot of people have been exposed to. Um, and so that was it. And it was wild because, it's interesting. I think without realizing I was writing this book, I had actually written big chunks of it in other iterations,
Mm.
whether it was like journalistic, just like journal writing, or the essays that I was working on, or these kind of more poetic prose things. So once I had a house for it, and the house being the like structure of pregnancy,
Mm.
it all kind of came together. So it's hard. It's an interesting question to answer because it's like, why did I feel like I had to tell the story? I didn't. Why did I think it had to be
Mm.
in this form? It didn't. It just was like, I was under a deadline. Again, not a way of writing I recommend for people, but it worked out beautifully here, where it's like I didn't have a chance to edit it very well. Like
Mm.
meaning by edit, I mean I didn't have a chance to like curate the story more, or like make it sound prettier, or like take things
Mm.
out the way I probably would if I wrote it in 2 years. And so it was much more raw and honest and unfiltered. And it's just a cool like a living artifact, this book of like this time in my life that I was kind of writing about as it was unfolding. Like Layla was, I mean, as I was writing the first full draft, once we had the idea, she was probably like a couple of months old. So
Oh
it had
wow. Very
just
new.
happened, Samia,
Mm.
you know? Because
Yeah.
then the things also take forever in the publishing world. So then you hand it in, and then it takes a while for it to go through the whatever. Maybe she was like 6 months old actually, because then I would have had to, because I'm marking like by the year. So it's like by the end of 2023, the book was written and I was doing edits. So yeah,
Mm.
it was, and Leda was born March of 2022. So yeah, I mean, it would have been like she would have been 6 months old, and I would have been like writing against the clock, kind of.
Mhm. Wow. And so I said just as we opened that I was completely like it's just like, like blown away by the book, and I think the thing that did that really was just this like honesty, this like unflinching honesty that you write about your experiences and the physical and the emotional toll of infertility and baby loss. Um, and as someone that is on my own infertility journey,
I'm sorry,
on my
Habibi.
own on my own struggles,
Yeah, Sammy. I'm
I
sorry.
I was just really really amazed by it because I have like I think I seek out stories and experiences like this so that I feel less alone, and I look for hope, and I look for understanding and community and sisterhood, I think,
Right.
with this very particular kind of experience. But this is a pain and a struggle that is incredibly personal and incredibly individual, but you've decided to write about it. And it's not even like, I can understand like sharing something that is so personal and wanting people to be
Right.
able to talk about it and to relate to it. But I think there also comes this sort of translation of something that is so personal into something that is like a public language and is
Right.
understandable and
Right.
is, yeah. So I wonder like what that was like for you, how hard or how easy, or what things you had to think about in terms of translating this very personal pain and journey
Into
into
this like
something.
more legible,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I mean, I think, I honestly think that there was something about working. First of all, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I just want to say
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
It's a really, it's a really lonely landscape to live in.
Yeah.
It's like, it's, yeah,
Mm.
it's not great. I will say, like, for me, I think that I was so adrenalized while I was working on it, because I was so relieved we found a structure that I was kind of able to dissociate in this way, where there was like Hala the person, Hala the writer, and then like kind of shoving it all together,
Mm.
and being like, I need to meet this deadline. I think the writer part of me was like, my eyes lit up kind of, and I was like, oh, I actually think this will be a good story. Now I can see the
Mm.
structure of the plot and the whatever, and I could sort of see my life that way for the first time in the process of working on these essays. And so I actually kind of think that I didn't have time to process
Mm.
the implications of what it would mean. So this is the kind of book where now I've done a bunch of interviews where people will ask me questions about things like, your daughter. They'll say her name,
Mm.
or they'll say Johnny, or they'll say, something. And I will like jump, because I'll be like, I'm sorry, how do you know that? It's like I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Because it was such a process of just getting it on the page, that
Mm.
I did and because again we were working against a deadline, I don't think I did any of the processing that one normally does with a memoir, of like, what are the implications that this thing is going to be in the world,
Mm.
beyond, like, my mom was like, I don't know if I want you to write about any of this stuff, and like, kind of like, I was mostly concerned about kind of the reaction through a familial lens.
Mm.
But the idea of like how to then translate it into a public, I was more just trying to honestly translate it for myself. It was a really, really meaningful, like an incredibly healing isn't even a big enough word. Like, it was a very anchoring process for me, as I was sort of living it, or had just lived a lot of it.
Mm.
It was how I processed it. Was I wrote it down, and I found language to pin the experience to the page. And I don't think I spent a lot of time thinking of audience. That's the truth. And though I
Mm.
think the best stuff is created that way, honestly. And it's actually really hard to drop into that state once you've
Yeah.
published, because you know that you
Mm.
have an agent, and you know that there are people who read it. But this book, I think there was some weird, I was kind of in that like sort of post, like newborn haze, kind of the first few months are so chaotic. I'm writing whenever I can. I'm not really sleeping. I'm finally excited that something has unlocked in the prose. Like, I'm kind of traumatized by the last couple of years between like marriage and infertility and whatever, so it's like I'm just sort of like, it's all just kind of coming out. So there was, yeah, I didn't have it. And then during the editing and getting ready for publication, there was the genocide. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think the other thing is also, you know what I mean? Like, there wasn't much of a time where like I had maybe this like 1 year window. I'm actually really trying to think of how long it took to, yeah, probably I'd say like maybe 8 to 10 months of writing it in the current iteration. And then it was sent off, and like the editor spent a couple months with it. And then October 7th, and then it was like editing to go to publication, to go to post production. I mean, so by the time it came out and I toured it in the States in June, I mean, I didn't like, yeah, I was also pretty dissociated from that, to be honest with you. So there's this really, I actually kind of, alhamdulillah, everything is its own thing. It's like, not that anyone wants these things to protect you from like a reaction, but like there is a way in which I've been continuously having to have these reality checks of like much more pertinent and urgent things in the world,
Mm,
where I'm like, that compared to that, yes, it's a very personal experience. And yes, it's very vulnerable to put it out there, but like, what is that compared to everything else we're living through and seeing?
mm,
Like it's kind of
yeah,
kept a lot of this stuff in check, I think, this year.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's so interesting just listening to you talk about this like disassociation with almost like what you're going through. And I feel like within infertility or fertility journey, often that's what happens. Like you're so busy going from
Exactly.
treatment to appointment to
And you get a
report.
blood test and you come back in 3 days and let's check your
Yeah.
levels. And yep.
And then you're like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And it's so relentless. There's so little time within that to process what you're going through. And I think there's this bit in the book where you're showing us what you filled out in your form as you were starting the surrogacy process. And there's this bit where they ask you number of times pregnant, 5, number of live births, 0.
Yes.
And I think just seeing that on the screen, and for you were just filling in a form, and I can imagine that you just did that. That's just fact for you. But I think when you see it on a page in a memoir that you're reading, the magnitude of it hits you.
Right.
And
Right.
I
Right.
I think I think that a lot about these experiences that we have in this regard, that when we're going through them, we don't understand the weight of them because we're just so busy getting
Exactly.
through them and
You're just
trying to move
surviving
towards.
it.
Yeah, we're surviving and we're trying to get to the the end place that
Exactly.
we hope
You're
that
not
we'll get to.
narrativizing it. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. You're not narrativizing it. You're not making poetry out of it. You're too busy
Mm,
trying to get to the next morning.
yeah.
And then later it's like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've had conversations with friends where they've had to really, in order to get something out of me, they've had to really dig. And I'm like naturally a very like I'm always thinking, I'm always reading, I'm always like writing. And so for them it's so strange that this thing that's such a big part of my life, I struggle to articulate it. I struggle to find the words because I'm happy to tell you what's going on. I'm happy to talk about the things that I'm trying and the
Right.
the appointments that I've had. But when it comes to talking about the processing of it, it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. And yeah, and I thought that was
I mean, I recommend writing a book about it under a deadline. Like, I mean, it's such a strange thing to say because it's so funny. It's the exact opposite advice that I'm
mm,
constantly telling writing students, right? It's the
yeah.
opposite of what we tell people is like, don't write about trauma before it's completely processed.
Yeah.
And don't, you know what I mean? And don't, what's it called? Don't, write for a deadline or write for publication about things that are really
Mm,
emotionally fraught. And I still think that's a good rule of thumb to live by. But there was just something about this particular experience. You know what I think it is also I, to your point, was so it was like pandemic, infertility, marriage. Is this happening? Is this falling apart? What's going to happen? Am I ever going to have okay?
mm,
Then I'm going to have a kid. Then it's going to be oh, but it's not going to be my body. Okay, it's going to be this other body. Okay, now I'm wait. Like there was something, and during that time there was like 2021 Gaza, and then 20, and then there was like the port explosion in Beirut the
mm,
year before during like there was all this thing about these places that I also was contending with of like what does it mean to be bringing like a child who has links to all these different places into this world, and
mm,
like what is her access going to be to these places, will she have any, what are the implications
mm,
of her being half white, what are like so I think for me a lot of it was also just like again I didn't that's not an era that I was like journaling. It's not an era
mm,
that I frankly wasn't even talking about it with friends. Like I was so now looking back on it, I think I was really depressed and I was really shut down. And I am somebody when I go through a rough time, like many people, I just retreat. Like I really retreat from the world.
mm,
And I was really interior. And it was the writing, it was really how I started to organize and make sense of what the fuck had just happened the last 2 3 years. Sorry if I can't curse on this. Like it was how I just started to be like, I don't even know. There's like a baby crying in the other room. How did a
mm,
baby get here? Like it was such a poignant kind of like tracking your like breadcrumbs in reverse, like tracking your footsteps of like how you even arrived at this moment. And I think it made for this really lovely kind of alertness in Layla's first year, because
Mm.
I was really like, just like, how did we get here? And then I would write about the struggles, and then I would go like pick her up and be like, this is you're a miracle, mashallah,
Mm.
like you're here. How'd you
Yeah.
get here? You know? It was just, it was, yeah, it was a really, it was a really poignant, yeah, it was really powerful.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so, so beautiful. And so obviously like there's a lot of like in the book, like we really get a sense of the struggle and the pain and the loss and the grief. And you do write about, you know, like the uterus being a body that's at war with itself. And
Right.
oh my gosh, that is so that's exactly what it feels like. When it feels like within you everything is just fighting each other, nothing is working the way that you want it to be.
Right.
There's no
Right.
peacetime. And I just wonder like how your relationship with your body through your fertility journey and your route to motherhood has changed. And I guess
That's such a
also
beautiful
like how
question.
that is, yeah, also like how that is tied into, because you professionally you're a clinical psychologist. So like how the two, I guess, like have, yeah, like worked together or come together for you.
I think that for me there's such a like, I think I mean, truthfully, I think I'm a deeply dissociated person. Like I'm somebody
Mm,
who, like a lot of people who've been exposed to trauma, which many of us have, um, I on the sort of hypervigilance dissociation scale, I gear more towards dissociation. Like I think I'm somebody that actually has a really hard time.
mm,
Funny for a psychologist and a writer, like being, if you were to at random moments be like, "How do you feel?" I'd be like, "I don't know," like, you know. And it actually takes a lot of work for me to like excavate a feeling and like really understand how I feel. And so I will sometimes default to performance instead, right? Like
mm,
pretending I know, you know, I'm like acting as something, as though something, girl, kind of context cues of what's happening in my life. Like this doesn't seem great, therefore I must be sad, or this, you know.
mm,
And I'm getting better at that. And the pathway to getting better at that, because of the whole, you know, body keeps the score, et cetera, is like, has been through somatic work and trying to be more somaticized in the
mm,
body, and like trying to be. And so I've worked with a somatic experiencing person for a while. I do. Brain spotting, which is kind of like, you know, trauma focused therapy. And I've like have, I mean, my meditation practice, it's so funny, fell apart entirely during COVID, and I've never gotten
mm,
it back in a daily way, which is such a testament to like how habits are built and lost. Like, but I do think like I practice a lot of like attentive, like, you know, like attentive moments during the day, and like
mm,
trying to really be like, where's my body, where's my pulse, where's my hand, put it on your chest, take a breath. So I would say like I still feel like I am very much in a meditative practice. It's just like the actual sits for me. Like I you know, I hope to return, I'm sure I will return to it, but like that
mm,
specific like routine kind of fell apart. um so I think I will say I'm more aware of my body now than I was
mm,
before any of this. My body was just a thing that I either used to as a sort of instrument to do things that oftentimes I would regret afterwards,
mm,
or it became a tool of like, so it's like it was a tool of wanting or a tool of exercising overcompensating control. Like in this, you know,
mm,
I write about like getting sober and then becoming kind of anorexic.
mm,
And so it was always just kind of instrumentalized, you know, it was utilized and weaponized in these different ways. But I don't remember ever having any real moments of tenderness towards it, or just like softness
mm,
towards it. um and then I think the fertility stuff really changed. It's, you know, there, like, I'm sure you know about, it's like, you know, like with fertility treatments, it's like you kind of, there's just a lot of stuff you can't do with your body. So in some ways, just the limitations make you more aware of it.
mm,
Being pregnant a bunch of times, and like, and become noticing that for me there were a couple of symptoms that enabled me to know I was pregnant before I'd even go in for the blood test. Like there were certain things where I'd be like, "Ooh, okay, I think it's gonna be positive." Like to have that kind of
mm,
understanding. It's not even intuition. It's just like to be so plugged into a body that you notice that. You know,
mm,
that I think started to become one of the ways that I rewired it, where I was like, "Oh, your body is a thing you can pay attention to and you can notice." Um, And then a big mantra for the first like year of Leila's life was like, if mama regulates, baby regulates. Mama regulates, baby regulates. Because I was like, I've done a lot of like reading on like attachment and co-regulation of nervous systems and whatever. And so, if she's having a freak out, like really, really a lot of work has gone into like noticing what that triggers in my system and what that triggers in my body. And then noticing that if I just keep my voice sturdy and if
Mm,
I take breaths while I'm talking to her, if I remember to breathe myself, I don't even have to say. I mean, I will also be kind of trying to calm her down, but just that, just holding her next to me while I'm taking a deep breath,
mm.
I feel her calming down
Oh, wow.
because it's not just mothers and I mean it's humans. Like I mean
Mm,
like people co-regulate each other and we co-trigger each other, right? But if you're
yeah.
with somebody who's taking deep breaths in a room, it's really hard to not calm down. It's really hard
Mm,
for your body not to be cued to take a breath. The mirror neurons in each of us, like it'll just be kind of lit up in that way. And so I think I'm more aware of my body vis-a-vis her. I'm more aware of it. I think it's I can catch quicker when like before I would get, I mean, I still get sometimes like sciatica or like lower back stuff, but it would be like so much worse before I catch it. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like it'd be so much further along before I'd be like, ooh, I got to go see the physical therapist. Whereas like now it's gotten so much easier to be like, ooh, I'm starting to feel a little bit of that twinge. I think I need to do that stretch. Like, it's nothing. Listen, I'm still dissociated. I'm still not like, I'm not like well in that way, but like, I definitely, there are these subtle shifts, and I feel like I'm in a body in the world much more often than I was before. That's how I would
yeah.
answer it.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds that sounds pretty amazing, actually, to, I guess, to become in tune with your body a little bit more.
Just a little
And
bit more.
yeah, and I know, like, one of the overwhelming feelings that I have towards my body is sometimes I feel like on this journey that my body is failing me,
Right.
and
Oh, sure, sure,
yeah,
sure.
and it's not
By the way,
work.
when I say sure, I don't mean, of course it's failing you. I mean, sure, that familiar feeling. Yes, yes, yeah.
And like I mean it's a horrible feeling to have in
I
a
know.
situation
Of
to be in,
course.
but also one that is really counterproductive for the journey that I'm on and you are on. Like, we
Exactly.
need our bodies to be healthy and happy. We know all of these things. Like, we need to keep our stress levels low. We need to make sure that we're fed well and watered, and all of these things that
Yes.
require a level of self care and self love. And I don't mean that in like a, I just mean it in a very basic way, as well
Right.
as a
Yeah,
very
yeah, 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 yeah.
deep, profound like acceptance of this is just what's happening to
Exactly.
me, rather than something is failing. And I wonder, like, how you've navigated, if at all, those sorts of thoughts and experiences over the years.
Totally. No, I mean, I think that there was a reason that I was like, yes, of course. It's because yeah, I mean, I think I
Mm,
like resented my body. I blamed my body. I was very afraid of my body. I mean, I am also
mm,
somebody that has historically and might again get like really caught in sort of like health anxiety spirals where I'm just like
mm,
terrified of what the body can do and what is it hiding from you and what's going to cut, like the body has not been a site of ease or
mm,
or like coziness,
mm,
for much of my life. And I say that as somebody that's actually quite able-bodied. Like I'm not
mm,
like it's not that, like a lot of this also is the link between the psychological and the physical and psychosomatic. And I think, having been a very, very anxious child who
mm,
then turned into a pretty traumatized teen and young adult, and then turned to addiction, then turned to a lot of unsafe behaviors, and then turned to anorexia, and then turned to kind of hyper control and whatever. Like I think that the body, like I just kind of acted like it wasn't coming along with me, but it very much was.
mm,
It felt like oftentimes something that was getting in the way. It was a nuisance. It was something that had to be addressed. um I think I write about at some point about how like I'm quite humbled by the body. Like someone says something and I'm like, oh yes, my body. There I am, embarrassed all over again by it, like by it
mm.
into the room. Like
Yeah.
I just never quite understood how to locate myself in relation to it. But yeah, I mean, I was so mad during the infertility time. I was like furious. I was so resentful. I had a really hard time being around people that could get pregnant easily.
Yeah.
I had like a friend that one of my very close friends got pregnant twice in like a year. And I was just like, leave some for the rest of us. Like, which doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I wasn't gonna have her kid, but I was like, there was just like something where it's like, I just was so mad, especially with the ectopic and like, and then you become, I'm sure, again, this might be familiar to you. It's like a rabid about time. You just become like a crazy person about time.
Mm,
Everything's about like you're counting down the months and like this, I could be here this time next February. I could be, they're always doing this arithmetic that's like miserable. Um, it doesn't bring, I mean, I was saying this to another person, like a friend of mine who's now going through some infertility stuff. It was just like, I was like, it just like doesn't bring out a great side in people. And like, you
mm,
just kind of have to accept that, you know? And I think like sometimes it just makes the person not kind towards themselves. Sometimes it makes them
mm,
unkind towards others. And sometimes, in my case, both, you know,
mm,
like I was just like mad at everybody, and kind of resentful and jealous and frustrated. And yeah, I mean, I think I will say this. I there was this is how I'll conceptualize it is I was somebody who was able to get pregnant very easily and I couldn't stay pregnant. So I had,
mm,
you know, on the spectrum of infertility, that was kind of my experience. Whereas like some people can't get pregnant to begin with, right? Or like what, you
mm,
know, for me it was like I would have the positive test. I would get the call from the fertility clinic, the HCG levels are looking good, they're going up, whatever. And I would have these brief pockets of time several times, again, 5 times, where I was like, oh, I'm carrying a lot. Like this is happening. And that to see how I then would change my
mhm,
behavior and my tone towards my body, how
mm,
gentle I would get, how much I would be like, we got to gentle exercise, like a lot of sleep, drink some water, like that. I think that was maybe also one of the first shifting points because I like to think of it as the shifting point was like Layla was born, but I actually I think there was something about like these previous encounters where because I would talk aloud a lot, so I would like just talk a
mm,
lot, like I'd be like 1 week pregnant, 2 weeks pregnant, whatever. Um, Starting to see myself through the lens of being like, oh, your body is housing a life,
mm,
and then and then when I'd miscarry, I remember maybe the second time or something, kind of being like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna go eat whatever. I'm gonna go smoke weed or eat.
mm,
And be like, well, you know, your body's still housing a life.
yeah,
You know, like I think that there was like
mm,
these little moments of just kind of like, you know, like there's still someone here.
yeah,
And that I think is a really profound and like quite emotional shift,
yeah,
you know? This isn't connected directly to the fertility stuff, but a similar thing of just like what the psyche is when it's like, well, I'll do something well for something I love or something I want, but not for me. Is that was a lot of the marriage stuff for me. Like my marriage, I mean, I'm
mm,
getting a divorce now, and like, and the book kind of was written shockingly not when I knew that fact, even though I've had so many people read it and be like, "Oh yeah, that marriage ended." I'm like, "How did you
yeah,
know?" And they're like, "It's so obvious. How did you not know?" But but I was like, you know, like one of the things that happened is like a lot of the stuff that had felt acceptable and livable and I can deal with it for the decade preceding Layla, once there was a child in the mix, became unacceptable. You
mm,
know, and in that same way, it's like, well, what's unacceptable for this little kid should be unacceptable for you too. You
yeah,
know, so like the things that you wouldn't want to do to your body if you were trying to kind of care for it and scaffold it for something else, that should apply here too.
yeah,
And a
absolutely.
lot of this stuff is easier said than done, but even sometimes just saying it aloud or hearing it aloud starts to, it like gets something in motion.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what one of the themes that's like really prominent in your book is this idea of waiting. And
Oh,
I really I really enjoyed, I guess, like reading about that because I was also reading it like, oh, I know exactly what this feels like, especially with
I'm sorry you had to read this book. This is actually like,
no,
I feel like a very triggering book to read.
yeah, I think there were things for sure in that book that I found incredibly healing and helpful
Okay.
as
Okay.
well.
That's nice
And
to
like
hear.
I said earlier on, like I think some of it just put words to things that I have been feeling and experiencing that couldn't find the words to, or
Right.
sometimes just
Right.
too
Right.
afraid also to just
Right.
say them out loud,
Sure.
um, or even to write them down because then it's out of me, and it's kind of nice that someone else, someone else has
Right.
done
Right.
that,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
also someone who is, for all intents and purposes, on the other side of the struggle that I'm currently on, and obviously like that doesn't take
I
away
know
from
exactly what you
anything
mean. Yeah, yeah,
you've
yeah.
experienced, but at least one of the happy endings that I hope to have. you
Right.
have you have a beautiful daughter that you're raising, and I'm
Alhamdulillah.
sure
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
filled with lots of wonderful things as well as challenges. Um, but definitely, I think the waiting. Obviously, like in the book, it's there's this waiting for motherhood, but there's this waiting for other things. There's waiting to be able to go to places, to return home, to understand things, to hear from people, to all of these things. And I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on this idea of waiting, and I guess like like what it means to you now that there's some things that you're no longer waiting for.
That's such a beautiful question. And you know what? You're making me realize something, which is I've lately been like, huh, you seem less frenetic and panicked than you
Hmm.
were around time.
Hmm.
Which is interesting because I'm 39, I'm turning 40 next year. And
Hmm.
I will say everyone and their mother that I know that is either 39 or who I've recently watched inducted into 40 in the last few years has like had a complete breakdown at 39.
Hmm.
Like just completely something or another. It's just like, you know. And I mean, listen, I still I turned 39 in July, so I still have time, right? We can still
Hmm.
check in on this. Maybe it'll come for me. But so, knock on wood. But I will say like I feel I don't know what it is. Like I don't know, maybe it's because so many things have happened in the last couple of years with Gaza, with the divorce on like a macro level, on a micro level with the divorce, like with having a kid, with now becoming the sole provider, like childcare provider. I don't know what it is, but I think there's something about there. I have much less panic about time, and you
Hmm.
would think that I'd have more, especially because one of the things that I'm thinking about now. I mean, this is maybe TMI, but is I'm like trying to think of I would like her to have a sibling, and like well, how would I go about that, and would I use a donor? Would I like kind of like you know I mean, I can talk to you about this because you know this world. It's like I have eggs frozen, so like that part is covered, and I would just
Hmm.
need to think about how to make embryos, and I would really, I would have to use a surrogate again. So in some ways, that process actually makes things easier. Like it's because you can kind of buy time in that way. But yeah, I don't know. Like and you would think that that would be just so frenzied. That question
Hmm.
of like, how am I going to do this? Where am I going to do this? Where um in the face of like this a marriage that I didn't want to ending, and in the face of my life kind of looking unrecognizable than where it was a few years ago, in some ways much for the better, some ways not so much. But I think there is something about like Layla Allah yahmiya, like there is something about, and maybe also having told the story of it, so it's
Hmm.
like both the being, but also there's something about having like rested, put the story to rest by
Hmm.
speaking it aloud, so I don't have to keep like yeah, like obsessing or ruminating on it.
Hmm.
And I wonder, I mean, it's not a very practical thing in life to have to write about everything in order to not ruminate it. But like there is a part of me that's like, I probably will have to write about like separation and divorce stuff in some way, although I would need
Hmm.
to be much more discreet with that because that's my kid's daughter, or that's my kid's father. But like there is something where I'm like, I took something that felt so enormous and so unnameable that spanned most of my 30s. This like,
Hmm.
will there be a kid? Will there not be a kid? That spanned most of my marriage, in the
Hmm.
larger question of will we have a kid? Will you consent to having a kid? It's taken up like God. The first conversation Johnny and I had about this, I was 27. You
Wow.
know,
Long
Layla
time.
was born, I
Yeah.
was 34, maybe 35, 34, 35. And like I'm now, the marriage is ending, I'm 39. Like that, this has like preoccupied
Hmm.
center stage for so long. And like the question is answered. Will I get to be a mother? I get to be a mother. Alhamdulillah. Like I can't imagine a better gift. But like, but it does, I hear that the question is, your question is a beautiful one because it's like, what has that done to the waiting? What has that done to the wanting? I
Yeah.
have to say, I think it's calmed it down.
Hmm.
I think it's calmed it down, and I think it's been sobering a little bit, and a little bit clarifying to also, I've learned a lot of lessons. I mean, I think maritally there was a lot of stuff around, this isn't a secret, it's in the book, of like, I had a kid with somebody who was very ambivalent about having a kid, who went back and
Hmm.
forth a lot about it. who I think wasn't sure if that was something that he wanted, who at some points was like, it's not something and I
Mm.
think that like that was also a lesson of like you can't leverage other people in your wanting.
Mm.
It's not fair to anybody involved in the long run, anybody, right? Um, so I think there's I think maybe that's also part of why now when I think about like, oh, will I be able to kind of find a sibling for her? What will this look like? Where do I want to raise this beautiful thing? Like, do I want to raise her here? Do I want to leave the country? Like, I'm having like I'm also maybe that's been part of the calming down is I'm like, and you have to like do it with discretion and grace for everybody that might be implicated or involved in it. I can be an
Mm.
incredibly impulsive person, very fast paced. Like I think quickly, I write quickly, I act quickly, I have very little impulse control. Like I'll just do a thing. I'm big on like I'd rather regret a thing I've done than one I haven't done, and like that's led
Mm.
how I've lived my life. But I think once you have a kid, you're not the only implicated one anymore. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of it where it's like, I think, yeah, like I feel calmer in terms of time, but I also feel calmer because I'm like, well, you're gonna have to think through your decisions now,
Mm.
in a way that I don't think I was before.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the other sort of connections or metaphors you make to baby loss and infertility is exile. Like you write
Hmm.
about you write about the link, I guess, between these things that's happening with you, with the displacements of your homeland and the
Right.
experiences of your family. And I found it so like just beautiful to read. And I've read other memoirs where people have done something similar. So I read a memoir a few years ago where somebody was linking her progression of multiple sclerosis with the displacement and the exile of her family historically from Palestine also,
Mhm.
and this feeling of like being exiled in some ways or being forced out of your
Right.
bodies and the body that you once knew.
Exactly.
um and I thought it was so moving reading that, and I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit, and just how we have this like intersection and this intertwinement of belonging and body and
Right.
fertility.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just what that all is.
I do. I mean, I think it's yeah. To build off what you're saying, I mean, I think that there is something where my identity has been very much shaped in the shadow of watching longing be personified over and over again, and watching
Mm.
it be like yeah, I've been sort of like raised at the knee of wishing for a thing that one doesn't have access to,
Yeah.
wishing for a return to a place, wishing for a return to a time, um oftentimes longing quite literally for people that I could, like my grandmother was I read about that of like, she'd be in Lebanon, she'd be in Lebanon, she'd come here for a little bit, she'd always go back. Like there was always this thing of like people are leaving, people are returning to another place, everything felt bifurcated. I remember one of my big fantasies as a kid was that we could all just be in one goddamn place, you know what I mean? Like can we
Mm.
not just like be under the same roof, please, and like so I think I've since I was a kid and I would watch the adults, like I mean I was 4, like I had just turned 4 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, which is where we were living, which is where my parents had been living, my mom her entire life, my dad most of his life, and my grandparents on both sides, my aunts and uncles on both sides, like everybody was really settled there. And
Mm.
I came of like came of memory age, at 4 you start to remember things, 4, 5, 6, like that was watching all of these caretakers of mine, my mom, my
Mm.
dad, my aunt, my uncles, like watching them navigate this new country, aka the US, in the aftermath of having lost all of these things. They
Mm.
lost the place they grew up. They lost the only home they really knew their whole lives. They
Mm.
lost all the markers of their youth. Their friends were gone. Everybody was scattered. There was no like, so it's like I also, it's not like yes, sure, I lost those things too, but I was 4 and I don't have as much access to those memories. Did that shape me? Of course it did. But what I do remember is watching it through them, you know
Mm.
and like imagine a kid being raised, like I mean that's like you're raised by people who have now just suddenly lost everything and are like scrambling to build a life in a new place,
Yeah.
um and so yeah, so I think for me there was a lot of that, or there is a lot of that I think about, of just like how do we like that was sort of my foray into my life and in my youth.
Mm,
And then I was just this like really nostalgic kid, you know. I was a super
mm,
bookish, poetic, very nostalgic kid, very much so in my adolescence, and just like love to yearn and love and long for things from afar. Um, it's like that's how I'm built. It's not good,
mm,
it's not bad. It's just like that's how I'm made, and like maybe like kind of just how I came into this world, but also like certainly how I was like raised. Um, and then yeah, and then you come into something where now you have the yet another thing to long for and to not be sure if you're going to have him. Am I going to cross the threshold of Palestine? Well, am I going to cross the threshold of motherhood? Right now,
mm.
here's another country I don't get to touch. You know, here's another thing I don't get to live in. Um,
Yeah.
and that was a big thing that I contended with the surrogate, is like I was like watching somebody be in a world that I didn't get to be in, you know. And that was like a
Mm,
thing I had to be really kind of blunt with myself about, is like my daughter's first house, so to speak, was like not my body, it was somebody else's
mm,
body. The first voice she heard was somebody else's voice, the first heartbeat was somebody else's heartbeat. And like, and that's very painful, you know, but that's like the first country she knew, so to speak. um but it's reality. And so yeah, so again, like feeling kind of exiled, and like the, you know, the metaphor is a little sloppy, it's a little bit like solipsistic, but like there would be times where I would feel sort of like I'm exiled even from my dog, like, you know what I mean, I can't even
mm,
like touch this experience. But it felt, you know, I mean, different content, similar process, it certainly felt familiar.
mm. And just listening to you talk, I'm just brought back to what we were talking about before, which was this idea of waiting. And just I'm just thinking about when we think about what's happening in Gaza and all the ways that people in Gaza and across Palestine are waiting also constantly for
Yes.
ceasefire, for
Yes.
return, for reconstruction, for hope, for the future. They're
Yes.
waiting for the
For
future.
reprieve, for the end of things, for the start of aid. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and I just like it just makes me wonder for you, I guess, because obviously like when we talk about waiting on a personal level, even if it's linked, even if it for you is about going to your homeland or reconnecting with your family, it's so incredibly just different for
Right.
people in Gaza. And I wonder how seeing what's been unfolding there, especially over the last 2 years, but before as well, how that's also interacting with your experience of waiting or your view of waiting.
You know, it's like I've thought of it less in terms of the waiting thing and
Mm,
more in terms of like just to be, I was like a new mom, like at,
mm,
you know, when like Layla was, she would have been like a year and a half,
mm,
in the fall of 2023. And I think there was just this like, she, you know, she was old enough that she could like engage, and in
mm,
some ways that made it hard, but like, but still I was still kind of getting my footing in what it means to be a mom, and I'd gone back to work and all this stuff. um when the assault happened, like when the assault on Gaza started, and I remember like the kids, just the kids. I mean, I think anybody, regard, it doesn't matter whether they have children or not, or they even interact with children in their life at all. Like that's like the mark of a society is how it treats their children, you know.
mm,
And the mark of a world is how it treats its children. And like the yeah, the metric of humanity is that. And so just to watch these children and to see what could be done to children's bodies, and what was being done by, in our case, those of us in the US, by our taxpayer dollar, I'm
mm,
paying for those bombs, sort of thing. Like, and then to the juxtaposition of watching all these clips of children, and then like you have your daughter, like it's like I don't even want to. And then like the superstitious part of me is like I don't even want to mention my daughter among any of this. I don't even
mm,
want to like talk, I don't even want to invoke her. And I like recently gave a talk where I was just like, but like my daughter is no more my daughter than anyone else's. Like I can't pretend, like that's exactly where the separation starts, right? As we go,
yeah,
that's their, those are their kids, these are my kids. Like
mm,
no, those are all of our kids. And like it's so, so for me it was, you know, the waiting almost, now I'm thinking about like, yeah, of course all of that, I can totally see how those, that applies too. Like, yeah, it's a blockaded, sieged off, open air imprisoned
mm,
people, you know, for decades, like who like have been waiting for reprieve. Um, and I wouldn't even, but that for me even feels like a stretch, because I'm like, my waiting, I don't think my waiting is very like, again, navel gazy and like cushy and privileged, and a lot of the times a waiting of my own making, like,
Mm.
um but I think for me a lot of it was just the mothering. It was the mothering, and trying to conceptualize what it even meant to mother, what it meant to have now, a half Palestinian kid in a city that had like suddenly started to feel very unsafe to be in New
Mm.
York, and uh how to begin to have those conversations with other people. Like, yeah, I think that was those first few months. And then, the separation happened very soon after. And then just being like, oh, I'm just taking care of this kid by myself. And I don't like, I'm so dysregulated all the time because I just don't know where is safe. And
Mm.
safe is like a very, I want to be clear. I don't mean where is safe as in safety here versus Gaza, but like where is safe
Mm.
given what I understood of safety in the parameters of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think there that like that would be, I think, the one that I was much more kind of aware of urgently. But I think it's that, but I think there is something about the Palestinian condition in general. It's like I can't speak to on the ground, but I can speak to sort of diasporically. Like, it is this very liminal, you're constantly on hold. It's like you're constantly on
Mm.
hold listening to like wait music. You're constantly waiting. You're not sure what the next thing is. Like that feeling of waiting, I think, is, again, that's why, like, when the infertility stuff started, I remember having the distinct feeling for a couple of months before I could pin it down, of just being like, this feels familiar. I feel like I've been here before,
Mm.
and in like an existential way. And then I was like, well, yeah, of course you have. You've been here most of your life.
Yeah. And you've written and spoken quite extensively about the Palestinian diaspora experience and witnessing, and just this idea of, like, I think you talk about never really having an option to look away, and how looking away is like a trick mirror,
Hmm.
um, and that there's never any relief. And yeah, and I guess just almost like from like your psychological lens, your clinical psychological lens,
Right.
what do you think the last 2 years has done for people of the diaspora in terms of,
Yeah.
like, not just in terms of like processing what's happening, but their own idea of home and belonging and identity?
I mean, I don't know anyone that's like doing well.
Mm.
Like, I don't know anyone that's in the Palestinian diaspora that is doing well. And the double whammy is, I don't know anyone in the Palestinian diaspora that's doing well, and that doesn't also then feel like shit or is terribly guilty about even
Yeah,
thinking about the fact that they're not doing well, because
yeah,
what is that in the face of anybody on the ground?
yeah.
Certainly Gaza, but the West Bank too. I mean, like, everywhere in 48,
Mm.
like, I mean, everywhere, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, I think they're like, that's, so I think it's, there's always that constant, like, you have to, like, the humility of it, but
Mm.
then the humility of it, I think, also is, you're continuously reshaping the size of your despair to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and like tuck it away more and more, because it can't even begin to compare with the
Mm.
horrors on the ground. um but the reality, just from a psychological perspective, is that, like, yeah, no one's okay. If you were okay right now, that would be, for me, that would be the clinical marker of like, uh-oh, we got to like check in on this person and see what's going on.
Yeah, something's not
Like,
right.
that would
Yeah.
be the thing that would that would be the thing that would concern me, is if someone was like,
Mm.
I'm thriving, I've never been better, um I think a lot of it for me has just been like, watching people, yeah, a lot of survivor's guilt, a lot of guilt in general, like just not knowing how to not center themselves if they're talking about their feelings. I work with a lot of people that are diasporic, and that's the most of the stuff that comes up is just being like, do I even have the right to say I can't sleep? Do I even have the right to say I can't eat?
Mm.
You know, um, and I feel that a lot too. Like, I
Yeah.
like, everything is superimposed, like Gaza is superimposed on everything. So it's like, my
Mm.
daughter had a crazy fever a few months ago, took her to the ER, couldn't, like, it was overlaid on the experience. Here's a hospital that's functioning. Here's antibiotics we can get with a snap of a finger. Here's a doctor that comes. I'm not worried about a bomb falling. Like, just like, I can't turn that part of my brain off.
Mm.
And I don't, and it's like, I don't even know how useful that is. Like, it's useful, I guess, in that it's good to, like, the humbling of it and the reminder of people and whatever. But I don't know that it makes me show up in a better way, as an ally or somebody that's like an advocate. Like, I don't know that I don't know, what I know is like, I can't unsee what I've seen. I think that's true
Mm.
for so many of us. I can't unhear the things I've heard. And that I'm changed forever. I'm complete, like the molecules of me have been rearranged,
Yeah.
and that's it. And like now there's a new, like, I will always be living my life in a, like with that. Like that's how it is. And it kind of really what the most sobering thing about it is, and this is the thing about privilege, and it's the thing about like a truly effective, um, violently created diaspora, right? Like a sign that it's been done well is that you feel really disconnected from the place. You feel so disconnected from it that you don't really think about it, right? I
Mm.
write about this where I'm like, I feel really disconnected from body and land. I don't think about land.
Mm.
I don't ever think about like Gaz's beaches. Like, really,
Yeah.
will I ever touch that? Like, that's not even, I don't even ask those questions.
Mm.
I've been to Palestine once. I wasn't like touching soil or looking at like, I'm really cut off from land in that way, in a way that I'm only starting to really think about in these last couple of years. And
Mm.
so, yeah, it's not like I, that, there's a part of that too, where it's, for me, there's a big part of me that's like, where have you been, Hala,
Mm.
for the last 2 years to hit as hard as they did? Because
Mm.
look, of course, the scale and the magnitude is a completely different level.
Mm.
But this is what's happened. This is what's happened over and over again in different ways. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So it's like, this is just an acceleration. It's an escalation of a thing that's always been there. That, again, my first novel is about Philistine. It's not like I haven't written or thought about these things, but to feel it, to be living in
Mm.
it, to be unable to think with a function
Yeah.
like that, that was also humbling, because I was like, wow, you really, I mean, you were effectively diasporized. You know what I mean? Like that, they did it on you.
Mm.
Where like it took this for you to be shaken to your core. So that's another thing that I think about too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you do, I mean, in the book there is, you do write about sort of the reclaiming of the body, but the
Right.
reclaiming of history, of lineage, of language. And I think that comes out most when you're writing about your experiences around alcohol and
Right.
your journey to sobriety. And I mean, again, like I was really, I think, um taken aback by just how honest you, like, you didn't filter anything, you didn't. And I appreciated that so much, because it's a struggle that we don't read
Right.
much about, and it's happening to people for a huge number of reasons.
Yeah.
And instead of attaching labels to it, or shame, or like disgust, or whatever else it is, it's so
Right.
easy to just like shrug off, I think, like, oh, that's a person just got an alcohol issue. Like, it's one of those things that I feel like we
Exactly.
don't
Yes.
take
Yes.
seriously enough
Yes.
in
Yes.
society, but it absolutely deserves and is in need of that level of attention and care as well. um and so I
Mm.
guess, like, I have a question that I guess is like twofold. So on the one hand, my question's about, like, what was it like for you writing specifically about that in relation to where you were on your journey with it? Did any of it feel like a
Wait,
relapse,
writing specifically about which part?
about your struggles with alcohol?
Oh, I mean, I wasn't listen, that one was more like, I was like the shame of the family. You know what I, like that
Yeah,
was a little bit more where I was like, I don't, I don't
yeah,
like I was a little bit worried about the just writing about that kind of, and because you know how I think our communities are, and like just like
yeah.
what that mean, how that reflects upon, etc. Um I think I thought of it less, it's, as we're having this conversation, you're helping me realize that, like, I think a very lovely defense system that I have is that my system will get fixated on one thing and then not look at anything else. And it's
Mm,
actually quite protective,
mm,
So for example,
yeah.
with like the alcohol, it's like I didn't even think about how it plays out with the other stuff. I was just so busy being like, I need to write about this in the way that it doesn't bring shame upon my entire lineage.
Mm,
And so that meant that I actually wasn't really I like, it's a beautiful question, and the honest answer is like, I don't even think I thought about it. Like, I think I was
mm,
more concerned with writing about it in a way that wouldn't like really upset my mother, truthfully.
mm,
And there's a similar thing with like the yeah, the marriage, like even the writing about the marriage, where it's like I think I was writing about the marriage in a way that I was writing about the marriage preoccupied with a certain thing. And that meant
Mm.
that I didn't even notice that actually, to most people that read the book, they were like, oh, this marriage is not going to last.
Yeah.
Like, do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, there's this interesting
Yeah.
thing where it's like, I didn't even think about that or editing for that or looking for that
Mm.
because I was too busy preoccupied with the thing. So I think there's like a, yeah, there's like a cool, there's a thing that's happens that that is actually kind of relieving with it, where
Mhm.
it's like it protects me a little bit. And then
Yeah.
after the book is out, I go, oh, well, did I want everybody who reads this to know that about me? But
Mm.
here we are. But I could not, I mean, I will say alcoholism, the experience of that boyfriend in Lebanon, all of these things,
Mm.
like the boyfriend experience in particular was one that my mom was really like, please don't write about this. Like she
Yeah.
was like, I don't
Yeah.
want that,
That's
which I
so
understand. I really got, but
mm.
and I was like, I can't tell the story without writing about
Mm.
it, you know? And there are other things I was asked not to write about that implicate other people
Mm.
directly, and I did not write about those. So my sort of ethical code on this was like, if a thing happened to me primarily, then it
Mm.
has to be fair game for me to be able to write about
Yes.
it.
It's your story. Yeah.
But the number of stories that Samia, the number of delicious stories that have happened in this family lineage that I'm sure you too, that I would love to tell, that would
I'm
make for such
sure.
cinematic writing and whatever. They were like, and I was like, you know what? That's not my story to tell. I can't
Mm.
tell it. So
Mm.
that's why like I kind of like was like, I'm gonna die on the hill of the bad boyfriend, because I was like, I can't. It's connected to the drinking. It's connected to everything that came after. It's connected to the way that I sought shelter in like white men because they felt safer. Like
Mhm.
it shaped who I became. You know,
Mm.
I can't not tell that story.
Yeah.
So I can tell it in as, as thoughtful of a way, but I have to tell it. So
Mm.
it's like those were the things that came up.
Yeah. And so I guess like the reclaiming, if you like, of your body that has come with the you becoming sober and you dealing with your alcohol issues. um have you had the space, I guess, to reflect on that as like a wider reclaiming of yourself, reclaiming of home, reclaiming of like your story and who you are?
I think to an extent, yes.
Hmm.
And I think the honest answer is it was probably motherhood that was
Hmm.
much more of a direct ticket into it.
For sure, yeah.
Because I think there's something about caretaking and mothering, which again, people don't have to be actual parents to father or mother or caretake, or you know what I mean. But like
Yeah.
for me, the active, I was not really mothering before Layla. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
I mean, maybe a little bit in some community building and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
sometimes in teaching, but mostly no.
Hmm.
And I was certainly not mothering myself, which I needed, and that's like something
Hmm.
also that's happened since she's been born. But I think that I think that for me, the mothering act has been the thing where it's like you then start to, again, like I was saying earlier, you start to think about how something impacts someone else. And for me, a lot of it was like, what is the kind of home that I want to have? That was a big part of
Hmm.
what led to separation, right? Like it's like, what kind of like world do I want to build and co-create with this creature for this creature,
Hmm.
you know? And like how can I make this place feel like home?
Hmm.
Not just, I mean, I think I feel like I kind of felt like I was just squatting throughout my life, in my
Hmm.
life, you know, just waiting things out until the next thing, waiting this place out until the next place. Like, and now the question has become like, where do I want to be for the next 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years? Like, I've never had that thought before. I've been in New
Hmm.
York for a long time, but just honestly, New York's one of those places that if you don't look alive, like a decade passes and you're just here. I think London's kind of like that, where it's like people come and they stay, and
Yeah.
then they're just like, where did my 20s and 30s go? So like I think there's a little bit of that where it's like I don't know that I love the city. I
Hmm.
love so much about being here, but I didn't really choose to be like, I'm gonna spend my this is where I'm building a place, you know. Um, and so yeah, I think that's been one of the things that's kind of led me to asking those questions. But to your point, of the alcoholism and getting sober and then kind of dealing with the eating disorder, I think it's all connected, because had I not done that, had I not gotten sober, I would not have the clarity of mind in my late 20s when I meet Johnny to say I definitely want a child. Like I
Hmm.
wouldn't have had the wherewithal to say like I want to have a kid, you know,
Hmm.
which then sort of set the next decade into motion. So it all stitches together now
Mm,
in hindsight, right? In the moment, everything feels messy and terrible and whatever. But like in hindsight, I'm like, every single one of those things had to like they had to happen for the next thing to happen.
mm, yeah. Yeah, I can really see that. I mean on a spiritual plane anyway, everything I think we
Exactly.
know somewhere that everything happens the way that it happens, but I think when you
That's
have a
exactly.
real awakening of that and a real understanding
I
of that,
know.
I think it just
I
is
know. I know.
completely different to live it rather than just keep telling yourself. Because I keep telling myself everything is happening the way that it's supposed to happen. There's a reason why I'm not a mother yet. There's a reason why XYZ thing has happened,
Right.
and but maybe something will happen that will just click for me where I will understand why all the pieces fell into place the way that they have done.
And you will do, in all likelihood, inshallah, when the day comes, Yarab, is like you will do the thing that we all do after a
Mm,
time of hardship,
mm,
that we are geared to do as humans, just from a pattern recognition place of our brains, is that
mm,
we go back and tell a story of it that makes it cohesive.
mm.
Because
Yeah,
that's how we survive this world.
yeah.
We go back and say, well, of course that needed to happen so that this other thing
Mm,
could open the doors so that I could try to do this thing. Like otherwise, where would we be in this life?
yeah,
You have to do it to survive,
yeah,
Because now I look back on, I'm like, I mean, I would have loved to stay pregnant at 27. That would have been
yeah,
great. It's not like I'm like, oh, everything was great, like, or I had to do that. And then those the following years were just so delicious. They had no, like there were so many shit. Like I would have liked option one, but then you go, I don't know, to your point of like divine plan and whatever. It's like I have
mm,
no idea what that life would have looked like. I don't know
yeah,
what might have happened. I don't know what it's like this is and to go even for for the like like from even more of like a kind of like a neutral sort of dry perspective. One of my favorite things, I was just saying this to someone at the gala thing last night. My favorite things I ever heard on a podcast, can't remember where it was, which podcast, but the woman was saying something and she was like, there are two people and the host was telling a story and the woman said, well, I mean, like that's it happened because it was meant to happen.
mm.
And he was like, well, uh it it's what was it? What did he say? He's like, it was meant to happen because it's what happened. And there was something about that line, Samia, I can't remember who said it anymore, and I think about it probably once a month. Where
Mm,
it's like in the counter of like, well, of course it had to, where it was like, well, yeah, I mean, it was meant to happen because it's what happened. It's the reality. And I think one of the big like ethos of my life personally is like I try not to negotiate or argue with reality. That has
mm,
given me so much. That's the biggest gift of the last like few years, I would say, has
yeah,
just been like the last maybe like since 34 to 39. So like last half decade of my life is a big guiding
mm,
principle has been like, hey, stop like debating reality.
mm,
This is what's happening. Like meet reality on its own terms, meet reality on the terms that are unfolding. And then what you've done is you've gotten rid of probably half of your suffering because like
mm,
a good portion of our suffering is us negotiating with reality, not liking it, resisting it, pushing against it. You know what I mean? It's like that's a big Buddhist idea too, is like and I think with like Islam and a lot of religion, it's like, it's like, well, then you kind of release it into like
mm,
Allah's hands and you just say, okay, which is the same concept. It's just like it's to set a thing down and just say, okay, this is where we are now.
yeah,
This is, I mean, a thing I mutter under my breath probably daily since October of 2023. And like then the marriage stuff, whatever, is like, this is just what's happening right now.
yeah.
This is just what's happening right now. I say it all the time. I said so much so that my daughter like mimicked me a couple of weeks ago. She was like, this is happening right now. This is happening right now. And I was like, okay, that's not whatever. That's not the tone that I'm using. But there's a lot where I'll just be like, this is just what's happening right now. What can you do?
Yeah.
What am I'm gonna lose more energy and time and like psychological like bandwidth, like lamenting it.
Mm,
That's what's happening now. And people think like that's like defeat or you've given up or no, it's I've now actually just put down the debate part and now
mm,
I can like contend with reality as it's actually unfolding.
mm. Yeah, that's very helpful.
But you
Well,
can have both those things true. I mean, like
mm,
Samia, I wish my ectopic hadn't been an ectopic. I wish
yeah.
that had been a bait. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like I can have like
mm,
both of those things can like you're allowed like I just want to say like it's also you're allowed to not like reality. You know, you're
Yeah.
allowed to be like, and that doesn't make you less grateful. It doesn't make you a less good person. It doesn't make, you know, it's like we're allowed to be like, wow, I really wish something else had transpired here.
Mm.
And also, I accept the terms.
Yeah. Hello, well, I would love to keep talking to you for another hour. It's been over an hour. And it has been so wonderful. Thank you so much
So much. Yeah, you too.
for your time today and for everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you a lot.
I hope you loved listening to this episode and found things that will stay with you. I'd love to hear from you, so please do reach out on social media and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review as it can really help.